Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the
I'm only
balance in
soft when I like somebody. The rest of y'all get this gangster shit, bitch.
So we're going to talk today about a few things, but mainly the subject will be about how the Supreme Court just overturned the Chevron doctrine. The Chevron doctrine, or the Chevron deference, was basically a ruling or something that was allowed to happen that enabled all federal agencies to create their own rules and their own laws, and to interpret any laws that they created or said that you must abide by in order to move around in this country. Not only did did this Chevron doctrine enable federal agencies to hold on, family. I had to tell them I'm going live. I'm live, darling. That's okay. Join me. Hey, bye bye. Not only does this doctrine allow agencies to create their own laws, but the laws would oftentimes be against we the people. And if you had an issue with those laws and you tried to take these laws or these federal agencies to court, then the courts would defer to the agencies. So the agencies were able to do whatever they want based on their opinions, based on their feelings, based on how they wanted to make money. It didn't matter what we the people desired. It didn't matter if it would hurt us. And this is one example that I brought up yesterday when I talked about the Chevron doctrine. And that basically is, let's see, for example, if you want if you want to drive or travel, because when you're driving, you have to be conducting businesses. Most of us don't drive, we travel. If you desire to travel, you have to get a driver's license, insurance, registration, and you have to pay fees and all that. Well, the DMV, or Department of Motor Vehicles, came up with those rules themselves. And if you don't abide by those rules, oftentimes you were, cited. You were cited. You could be charged, and you could go to court. And so it didn't matter to them if you went to court, because then the judges or administrators would just access your trust, because the judges see themselves as being the administrator of your trust, and you were seen as a minor, and they would just access your trust and take out that money for whenever you would pay them the fine or whenever you would show up to court. Now, in terms of how that would work legally, I'm going to have Asir Duca Tears, who is a Moor and who teaches about law, real law, and civics, to come on the show whenever he gets a chance. He said he would, and go into detail about what that meant whenever we would go to court. But when you wanted to travel, you had to have a Department of Motor Vehicles permission, the license, the registration, and insurance. And it didn't matter if it was unlawful or not. And again, if you went to court, the judges would defer to these agencies. Other federal agencies, FBI, CIA, EPA, and a whole list of them that you all know, and I'm going to show you today. But before I show you what those lists of agencies look like, because it's an extensive list of federal agencies, I just want to acknowledge everybody that's here and say hello, good evening, grand rising, good afternoon, good night. Welcome. This is July the 2nd, 2024. And it's important for me to say the date, because I like for everybody to know exactly when these podcasts are happening. So when you go back, you can say, okay, we had a date and a time stamp. And the time right now is 3:25 p.m. So you can know when things happen in chronological order. I try to do that just to keep things on record, okay? Captain says, Trump July 11th sentence has been halted. Awesome. Hey, to Curly, it's good to see you, darling. Pam says good afternoon. Greetings to you as well. She says, this is my first time actually catching a live show. I'm excited. Good day to Sister Linda. God bless you. Pam says good day. Central Hill County in Texas is in the house. Hi, Shannon. You've been hearing so many conflicting reports about what this actually means. Okay, well, I did a podcast on it, and I also brought up articles on the podcast that I did yesterday. I'll see if I can bring up one of them for you in a few minutes, and we can go over that. Hi, James. Or Jamie. Yes, James. Good to see you. Hello, Vince. Ace. From Ohio. Hi, Sister Kimberly. Love the beautiful flower. Thank you. I appreciate you. Hello. Good greetings. Oh, I see you all in the house. The Ola's in the house. Hi, sister. All right, family. So you're welcome, Sister Jackie. We're going to have an amazing day. Hello, family. I see you, Justo. People are in jail right now because of this DMV corruption. Absolutely, Captain. All the things that they've been doing is unconstitutional. Hi, Maxine. Honora's in the house. Hello. It's a great time to be alive. Passport should not be needed. And from what I'm understanding from people who have served in the military veterans, is that these departments have 6 months to totally dissolve. If I can find that written out for you, I will gladly report on it. But I heard by the end of this year, they should be dissolved. So glad I was able to see you here too. So glad God did things for my safety. Amen. Blessings to North Carolina. Terry's in the house. Sister Linda says, I look beautiful. Thank you. Hi, Patricia. You know, I'm in Northern Florida as well. It's good to see you. Grand afternoon, Love Being. Nubian, it's always good to see you. Mind Binding Trap says, hello. Grand Rising, Clear 9. Oh, West Michigan is in the house. This is where my best friend is from. Hi, Mariana. Hello, Bink. What is it? Binka Ray. God bless you. Good day, Shantae. David Coronas is in the house. Oh, Toronto, Canada is here. Hello. Thank you. Audrey says, I love your show. Thank you for all you do. It's my great pleasure. Family, we have 306 people in the chat. Hit the like button. Love Being Nubian says. Subscribe to the channel. Share the videos because we're helping everybody raise their vibrations and giving them the information to remind them that our freedom is nigh. Our freedom is here. Hi, Dari. Great peaceful day to you too. Happy afternoon, Pamela says from North Carolina. Northern Michigan is in the house. Hi, Kathy. Good afternoon, brighter day. Oh, so many of you are here. Hi, Angela. Please don't say this out loud, but. Oh, okay, Angela. Okay, yes, ma'am. Hello, my girl. It's good to see you, Paula King. Is it Paula? Yes. Aloha. Nature heals within. You guys are just amazing. Thank you, Dr. Pruitt, for your beautiful personality. You're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here to share joy with my family. Good afternoon, Darcy. What does this mean for the people on federal probation? Interesting. It should be an overturning of that, right? For the people who had to go to jail or be on probation because of violating these fake laws. I'm going to see. I'm going to write your question down and look into that, okay? What does this mean for people on probation? So what I'm going to do, hi, Sci-Fi, is, it's good to see you, is show you a video of someone from the mainstream media, a mainstream media reporter talking about the Chevron doctrine being overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States. So, hi, Zachary. If you're just joining the live, we're going to talk about how the Chevron doctrine was overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States on June the 28th, which was last Friday. And that meant that all of the federal agencies that were allowed to create their own laws and even interpret laws that were written before, certain administrations, they are now overturned and they were deemed as unconstitutional. These agencies created their own laws, their own rules without the help or the advisement of any lawful people or any, without any lawmakers. They just made them up themselves. And if you took these agencies to court because they may have said you violated a law, then the courts would defer to those agencies. So if a court defers to the agencies and the judges defer to the agencies, knowing full well that these agencies created their own laws based on their feelings and based on whatever they wanted to do, and we all know that those laws were unconstitutional, then I surmise and I say assertively that these judges have committed high treason, because a judge, which they're not really judges, they're administrators, did not uphold the law themselves. So you're going to see a lot of judges being arrested very, very shortly. Those random DUI checkpoints by cops are horrible. Yes, they are, and unlawful. Thank you, Kimberly. Oh, thank you so much. Michael Mathis gave us a blessing, a love offering. Thank you so much. God bless you. I am so honored and pleased and grateful. Sister Kimberly, yes, those DUI checkpoints by cops, they can do them whenever they decide to as well. They are unconstitutional. So speaking of cops, we're going to bring that up too. A lot of your police departments were actually created to catch slaves, whether it's so-called runaway slaves, whether they look like me, they were classified as Black, or if they're any kind of slaves. And if you are a citizen of the United States Incorporated, you are a slave. And that's why you have a lot of people in the sovereign movement and a lot of people in the Moorish community that actually took their names and the incorporated version of their names, the all capital letter, and took names and took over those names, and so that they would no longer be considered a citizen. So a citizen is the same thing as a slave. We're not citizens of the United States Incorporated. We're sovereign, means that we have rule, reign, and control over our own lives. Sov means over, reign means rule. We have rule, reign, and control over our own lives. And that's the way it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to have all these federal agencies coming up with their own laws. So the thing about being sovereign is you're not supposed to have a police department to enforce policies and statutes upon you. The policies and statutes are a part of the United States Incorporated. You know that the United States Incorporated is not the lawful government. That is the bloodline families, a group of beings that usurped authority from our republic. They took over our republic. They snatched power from the republic, although the republic is still standing. So you have the United States Incorporated and you have our lawful government, the republic. The United States Incorporated has their own statutes and codes and policies. They are about legalities. The republic has a constitution for the Republic of America. Constitution of the United States Incorporated is unlawful. Constitution for the people, for the Republic is lawful. For good, of bad. So the United States Incorporated has a constitution of the United States. This group of bloodline families incorporated themselves in 1871 as a nonprofit religious organization in Delaware and registered in Delaware. Religious is because the Pope oversees or oversaw the United States Incorporated in Delaware. Interesting. Statutes and codes. What they had put in place, is policy enforcers or police officers to enforce the statutes, codes, and policies and legalities of the United States Incorporated and their constitution. During the shutdown of the world, when people were saying defund the police department, the reason why that was not a good thing on one hand is because what they had intended, the deep state or the United States Incorporated had intended, was to get everybody to try to say, let's take away money from the Department of the police department before the Republic had been restored. Because what would happen if they had defunded the police department at that time, the communists that was running our country under the guise of the United States Incorporated had intended to get rid of the police department and then bring in a communist military to serve as a police department. So President Donald Trump said, you don't want to defund the police department. At least not now is what I was thinking he wanted to say. He said, you don't want to defund the police department. What you want to do is to weed out the bad apples and then modify the police department, and then also put in certain social workers, different people who could come in and help people when they're in crisis. So what my understanding of the Constitution was letting me know is that he was setting people up for the Republic to be restored. So you couldn't defund the police department right then. You had to weed out the bad apples and modify the police department. Well, he couldn't just come out straight out say it. But according to what he really meant is, according to the Republic, We're going to get rid of the police departments. Yes, we're going to weed them out, but we're going to retrain them. And the only lawful policy enforcers or law enforcers really that we will have are constitutional sheriffs. So you see, the constitutional sheriffs are on this side, with the republic, our lawful government, and they will enforce laws. So the police departments or cops, popo, what 50, the pigs, whatever. I want to be careful because I have family that's popo. The ones that want to remain, they're going to have to be retrained, and they will have to find their way here with the sheriff department and the constitutional sheriffs. Just like judges and lawyers who work here, they work for the United States Incorporated. They pass a bar, a British accredited registry, BAR. When they pass the bar, they're now approved by who? The British accredited registry. They work for the Queen, the British Crown. I don't know if they know it or not. So they will have to be retrained in constitutional law, but really they have to cease and desist. And if they want to remain as a law person, a lawyer or a judge, then they're going to have to be completely retrained, because their training right now does not prepare them to serve we the people. They serve the Queen. But the Queen is dead. The Pope is gone. The United States Incorporated is defunct, bankrupt, insolvent, kaput. What's standing? If these two were operating at the same time, United States Incorporated and the Republic, but this United States Incorporated is defunct and insolvent and bankrupt, and all of the agencies attached to it must cease and desist, then what's still standing? The lawful government, the Republic. And when our Seer Duke of Tears come on, he's going to tell us what that means for us all, not only in America, but all across the globe. And this brings me to what just occurred. And I'm going to show you this. What just occurred with the United States Supreme Court. I'm going to let you hear it from mainstream media first, and then we'll look up an article and read something about it. Let me know if you can hear this. Please put yes in the chat if you can hear it, no if you cannot.
Sweeping decision by the Supreme Court to overturn what's called the Chevron precedent here. The reason it's significant is because it has enormous implications for the administrative state in the United States of America and all federal agencies and their ability to interpret the law. What the Chevron precedent was a 1984 case from the Supreme Court which held that in absence of other information, courts should give deference to administrative agencies' interpretation of the law. That gave a huge area of wiggle room for federal agencies to interpret what Congress meant when it passed given laws, if there was any gray area in those laws. What the Supreme Court is now saying this morning in a 6-3 decision is that courts may not defer to an agency interpretation of the law simply because a statute is ambiguous. Chevron, they say, is overruled. Again, that is a 6-3 decision. One interesting point here, going back to the Chevron case originally in 1984, the Supreme Court writes, Chevron, decided in 1984 by a bare quorum of 6 justices, triggered a marked departure from the traditional judicial approach of independently examining each statute to determine its meaning. So some skepticism here of whether that case was originally decided correctly. The Supreme Court now saying it was not. Chevron is overturned, and there's going to be enormous questions now, Carl, for administrative agencies across the federal government as to how they move forward with interpreting rules when there is a gray area in the law. A lot of uncertainty now for federal agencies. Carl, back over to you.
So some people saying it was a little low. You can hear it, but it's a little low. I'll try to play it again. But basically, federal departments were able to make their own laws, and they were also able to create any rules that they wanted for themselves. And if you challenged it and took these laws to court, or if you had to show up to court to pay a fine or something like that, you could even hire an attorney. It didn't matter. The judge will always defer back to the agencies that created the law. So I'll play it one more time for the people who couldn't hear it. And I'll try to turn up just a little bit. As I said, I'm in a library, so I have to be a little quiet.
decision by the Supreme Court to overturn what's called the Chevron precedent here. The reason it's significant is because it has enormous implications for the administrative state in the United States of America and all federal agencies and their ability to interpret the law. What the Chevron precedent was a 1984 case from the Supreme Court, which held that in absence of other information, courts should give deference to administrative agencies' interpretation of the law. That gave a huge area of wiggle room for federal agencies to interpret what Congress meant when it passed given laws, if there was any gray area in those laws. What the Supreme Court is now saying this morning in a 6-3 decision is that courts may not defer to an agency interpretation of the law simply because a statute is ambiguous. Chevron, they say, is overruled. Again, that is a 6-3 decision. One interesting point here, going back to the Chevron case originally in 1984, the Supreme Court writes, Chevron, decided in 1984 by a bare quorum of 6 justices, triggered a marked departure from the traditional judicial approach of independently examining each statute to determine its meaning. So some skepticism here of whether that case was originally decided correctly. The Supreme Court now saying it was not. Chevron is overturned, and there's going to be enormous questions now, Carl, for administrative agencies across the federal government as to how they move forward with interpreting rules when there is a gray area in the law. A lot of uncertainty now for federal agencies, Carl. Back over to you.
So because I am in a library, I can't turn it up too loudly, so please forgive me. Can I replay it with higher volume? Let me see. Somebody says I have my Bluetooth and you still couldn't make it up. Okay, well, let me just, it is it's on my channel, on the YouTube channel. So the video is up. I put it up earlier today, so I want you to go back and look at it. And I also put it in the description section of this channel. So it's on my channel. It's its own video that was put up earlier today. So I'll let you look at it there. And then I'll read you this article now so you can see what it said here. In a major ruling, the Supreme Court on Friday cut back sharply on the power of federal agencies to interpret the laws they administer, and it ruled that courts should rely on their own interpretation of ambiguous laws. So again, the power of federal agencies has been cut back, and now the courts have to rely on their own interpretation of ambiguous laws. The decision will likely have far-reaching effects across the country, from environmental regulations to healthcare costs. By a vote of 6-3, the justice overruled their landmark 1984 decision in Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council, which gave rise to the doctrine known as the Chevron doctrine. Under that doctrine, if Congress has not directly addressed the question at the center of a dispute, a court was required to uphold the agency's interpretation of a statute as long as it was reasonable. You hear that? Under the Chevron doctrine, if Congress had not directly addressed the question of the center of a dispute, the court was required. Who does that? Who requires a court to uphold an agency's interpretation of a statute? But you know why they will allow the agency to interpret the statute? Because agencies are incorporations and they work with the United States Incorporated. You see, it didn't say, it says, if Congress has not directly addressed the question at the center of a dispute, a court was required to uphold the agency's interpretation of a statute. It didn't say of a law. Remember, laws, lawfully binding, has to do with the Constitution. So if were in the center of the dispute, then courts were required to do whatever the agency says and to uphold the agency's interpretation of their own statute and of the statutes and codes, not only of the federal agencies, but of the United States Incorporated, because they're all one big mafia. Remember when John F. Kennedy Jr. was on my show the other day? David Keith Quigley, who, you have to read his story, Stolen Identity. Get the book on Amazon if you want to know who he really is, who he claims to be, if you know, depending on what side you're on. But he said it's all one big mafia. All the corporations, federal agencies, the CIA, FBI, Secret Service, EPA. I'm going to bring you the list of all these companies. They all work together. They're all part of the United States Incorporated. They're all part of Hollywood, entertainment, athletics, NFL, NBA, they all work together. One big cabal, one big mafia, one big club. And guess who wasn't invited? We the people. So, under this doctrine, if Congress has not directly addressed the question of the center of dispute, a court was required to uphold the agency's interpretation of the statute as long as it was reasonable. But in the 35-page, as long as it was reasonable, according to whom? Reasonable? Reasonable, that's what they say? Relative? Who determines what's reasonable? We have laws according to the Constitution, right? But they can have gray areas, as the video I just played said. If you have a gray area, it always was deferred back to the federal agency, whether or not you violated their statute. In a 35-page ruling by Chief Justice John Roberts, the justice rejected that doctrine, calling it fundamentally misguided. When the Supreme Court first issued its decision in the Chevron case more than 40 years ago in 1984, and remember there was a book called 1984, look it up and see what it was about, because it was telling you about how they were taking away our freedoms. So I think it's interesting that the Chevron case was allowed to continue, or this doctrine became widespread in 1984. They were able to just do whatever they wanted to do, these federal agencies. Remember, federal agencies are not attached to our republic. It's not lawful. It's not our government. They're not supposed to govern us. When the Supreme Court first issued its decision in the Chevron case more than 40 years ago, the decision was not necessarily regarded as a particularly consequential one. But in the years since then, it became one of the most important rulings on federal administration law, cited by federal courts more than 18,000 times. Cited by federal courts more than 18,000 times. So I will let you read a little more about that on your own. I just wanted to tell you what this was about. Roberts says he rejected any suggestion that agencies, rather than the courts, are better suited to determine what ambiguities in a federal law might mean, even when these ambiguities involve technical or scientific questions that fall within an agency's area of expertise. Roberts emphasized Congress expects courts to handle technical statutory questions, and courts also have the benefit of briefing from the parties of their friends of the courts. Now, I think it's interesting that the courts deferred it back to the federal agencies, because not only is that treasonous, but keep in mind that most of the Congress people have Esquire behind their name. Do you know what that means? And I have lawyers in my family, in my circle, and I love them. Okay, and in my actual family. When you have Esquire behind your name, you have a title of nobility. The Constitution says that if you have a title of nobility, you may not create laws for we the people. I'll say it again. Esquire behind your name means you had to pass the bar, the British Accredited Registry, which means you work for the British Crown, the Queen. It also means you have a title of nobility. If you have a title of nobility, you may not create laws or write laws for we the people. Why? Because if you have a title of nobility, just by virtue of the name, it means that you're above the people. And you serve the Queen, the best interest of the Queen, the court, the Pope, the British Crown, not we the people. So the Constitution says you may not create laws. So most of the people, and I think it's almost all of them, the con artists or Congress, most of them have Esquire behind their name, whether they earned it or not. So they will have to cease and desist. They're going to have to stand down anyway, since the United States Incorporated is bankrupt, insolvent, and defunct. And the Republic is standing on its own, and the Constitution for the United States. So the Congress, lawyers, judges, cops, Popo, 5-0, so-called administrators, if they want to continue, they're going to first of all, they're going to have to cease and desist and stand down. And if they desire to continue, they're going to have to be retrained. So Congress is going to have to be done away with anyway. Very, very interesting. Now, if you know the story of motu proprio, and I'm going to ask Seer Duke of Tears when he comes on to talk more about that. He's a gentleman that talks about Moorish law and civics and the real law of this land. I'm going to have him explain more about motu proprio. But basically, it was a letter that the Pope had sent to President Obama in 2014, 2015. And he said, the United States Incorporated is coming down. The Grand Army of the Republic has been put in place to take down the United States Incorporated. He lists the general of the Grand Army of the Republic, and he said, we must cease and desist. He said, President Obama and all presidents before him did not serve the best interests of the people, and neither did they work for the Republic, but they work for the United States Incorporated, and they are not the same. The United States Incorporated is not the same as the Republic. He said, all lawyers, all judges, all federal agencies, all three-letter agencies are to cease and desist. And if you don't, the Grand Army of the Republic will take you down. Was he doing that to be benevolent? I highly doubt it. I believe it was the Grand Army of the Republic, the white hats of the military, the Galactic Federation, God himself or herself told him, you better get this out. So that was called motu proprio. I have videos on my channel about it, about how the Pope foretold how all this would happen in 2014, 2015. And he also talked about how slavery was created to pay off the debt. He said, we did it first to the African American people, and then we enslaved everybody. You got to read the letter, but we don't have time for that today. So let's look at the federal agencies that were creating their own laws. Here's a register. First, I'll let you see a short video. Hold on. Because some people are. Okay, so it's going to start with from A through C, but I'm going to show you a very lengthy list. It's without the video. And I hope we don't get flagged for the music. Maybe I should turn the music down. That's what I'll do. You see that? I'm going to put it on double speed so we can speed through it, and then I'm going to show you the list on my computer. Mm. I showed you a quick sped up version. Can you hear me, guys? Family, I showed you a quick sped up version of that list, and I'll put that in the description section for you as well. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is, let's see what I'm going to do. Stop sharing this and show you another list. Yeah, I know, right? Freedom feels so good. So people are saying, but how long will it take? Like I said, they're supposed to be cease and desist immediately. But as I was told by a former military personnel, professional, she is actually a veteran, is that they are supposed to be completely down within 6 months. So let me show you these federal agencies that we no longer have to submit to. We probably really didn't have to, but everybody was in cahoots. The courts were in cahoots, so they would lock us up and make us pay fines. Let me see if I can find you. Here is the Federal Registry. of agencies. There are 439, 439 federal agencies that are registered here on this list. And family, this is a new computer. I'm having a challenging time trying to figure out how to enlarge the words. My other computer, I used to be able just to touch it and enlarge it. It was so beautiful. This is a Mac. I just need to get more computer savvy, technologically savvy, So I apologize, but I'm going to put this in the description section for you as well. So if you wonder why I'm kind of talking kind of low, I'm in the library. I am in a room, but it's like right near everybody else. And I don't think the door is that noise proof. So look at this 439 lists of federal agencies. How in the world can you circumvent these statutes and codes and these evil, wicked people that was a part of the mafia, the cabal, the so-called government what does government mean? Govern, control, meant the mind. They were trying to grape, control, and rule over our mind rather than allowing us to walk into our sovereignty. So but they don't have a right to govern us. They're unconstitutional. So they were supposed to cease and desist. They should have never created themselves. They were never were not, according to the Constitution, allowed to create themselves. They just did it. And then they had policy enforcers, also known as police officers, lawyers, judges, which are not really judges, they're administrators. Judges are lawful. Well, I should say they had administrators and attorneys. They didn't have lawyers and judges. But it was hard to circumvent them and roam about our own land as a people here in America and across the world because they were all one big mafia. So here are some of them that were here. Administrative Conference of the United States, Administrative Office of the United States Courts. Look at all these A's: Advocacy and Outreach Office, Federal Court and Corporation, Farm Service Agencies, like they were ruling over our food. All of these are part of the Agricultural Department. Air quality. See all these A's. Then you have a few B's and C's. Look at this, 439. Executive Council of Integrity. Somebody said the Department of Education. Absolutely. Education Department right here. Farm Credit Bureau, Farm Credit Insurance Corporation, government. Federal Reserve System is right here. I wonder what it would show if you click on it. Look at all this. All the way down, and I know we don't have time to go through it, but all the way down to Women's Progress Commemorative Commission, very, very Veterans Affairs on the V list. All of this, we had to abide by all of these 439, and there might even be more that I don't know about. But no longer can they rule and control us. And the thing that's interesting is when you think about it, on the one hand, we were complicit in our own enslavement because we went along with it. On the other hand, it was like if you didn't go along with it, you could be put in jail. And that's why you had certain people that would teach you how to do a status correction so you no longer had to be a part of the United States Incorporated. And I'll ask Asir Dugateers to explain how we became citizens. How did we become slaves? I think it has something to do with when we were born. We came through the birth canal and our parents signed or our mom signed. You see how tricky they are? The birth certificate in a hospital, when we're thinking, oh, we're just registering the name of our children. Yay, right? In the old days, used to do that when our children were born, just put it in the family Bible. But under the corporation, see how slick they are? They created these statutes and codes that probably were unconstitutional and told our moms to sign a birth certificate. Then they took the birth certificate, created it into a bond, traded it on the New York Stock Exchange, and now we become chattel property of the United States Incorporated. Crazy. And all these federal agencies can now force us to do things because we're citizens of the United States Incorporated. And they were all in bed together. Crazy. So you have people that call themselves sovereign. They're not sovereign citizens. Now, the mainstream media would tell you they're sovereign citizens. That's not true. They were sovereign. You can't be sovereign and a citizen. That's a misnomer. You can't be both. Sovereign means you're free and you belong to you're your own entity and you abide by the Constitution and the Republic. A citizen is a slave of the United States Incorporated, chattel property. But you had sovereign people and Moors and many other people that lived in the private who would do status corrections, take control of their long form birth certificate. If Chief Mack was here, he'll talk about it. I think Chief Mack's going to come on and tell us more about that. Take control of their long form birth certificate and take control of their all caps name. And then that way, they didn't have to get a driver's license. They didn't have to get the United States Incorporated's passport. They had their own, I don't even know if you call it a passport. They were free to roam about the whole world. And so the mainstream media made people think these folks were the sovereigns and the nationals and the Moors, and made you think that they were crazy and tried to put some of them in prison. But if you did the status correction correctly, you didn't go to prison. They just did, those were fear tactics. Or people would do it improperly and end up in prison. But they knew this, that the United States Incorporated was evil, wicked, criminal agents, and had a whole list of agencies that was in cahoots with the Federal Reserve. I'm not the Federal Reserve, well, the Federal Reserve and the United States Incorporated. Pure Soul Bay says, you are born sovereign. It's a matter of status and nationality or being a private citizen or being private. There's a difference between operating in the private and the public. Diego says, things are starting to stick. Yes. It's not an easy process, Plant-Based Wife says. I'm going to bring on Asir Dugateers to talk about it, the status correction, and Chief Mack. Chief Mack will come on and tell you about status correction as well and what the process looks like. I don't know that we have to do it anymore now that the United States Incorporated has to cease and desist, and all the federal agencies have to cease and desist because they're working against us. They've been determined unconstitutional. But as Chief Mack told me, it's better to, what do you say, to have and not need than to need and not have. So he says that you still should do it just in case it takes them too long to come down. Linda says humanitarian projects will help everybody. Community will help each other in all gardens and dressmaking, cooking, building contractors to building homes, homeschooling also. Amen. And speaking of humanitarian projects, we're going to have a beautiful, beautiful sister on. Well, I know her name that she goes by is, let me see, the Madam Mogul. Let me see what her name is. She did give me her real name, and I'll be forgetting it. But we're going to have the Madam Mogul to come on tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. to talk to you about how to create a humanitarian project using ChatGPT. So Gold Star Mother Susan Price and I have done a few shows on humanitarian projects, and Gold Star Mother Susan Price has helped hundreds with an S of people with their humanitarian projects. And she helped you create a plan, a vision, a statement, and lay out the details. She helped you polish it with pictures. She did a phenomenal job. And people who did that gave her a gift for her time because it took her hours to do it. But the time is up for that. We did this about a year or two ago, maybe a year ago. Mother Price is a prolific writer. I'm going to bring up one of her articles now. And she doesn't really have the time to sit down and help people with humanitarian projects. So the Madam Mogul is going to come on tomorrow. And she's saying, hey, and talk to you about how to do a humanitarian project using ChatGPT. And I think ChatGPT is AI. So if you're interested in creating a humanitarian project using ChatGPT, she's going to tell you how to do it by yourself, a free version. But this is her business. So if you want her to sit down and help you with it, because she's using her time, you will have to pay because it's a business that she's doing it, But she will show you how there is a way you can do it yourself. So that's exciting. We're going to have her on tomorrow to show you all how to do humanitarian projects because, like our sister just said, we're going to be helping each other. Once these corporations come down, the corporations and the federal bureaus, the agencies come down, we're going to be in a precarious place. A good place, though. Precarious because we're so accustomed to having all these federal agencies guiding our lives and telling us what we have to do, right? And then at the same time as you have that, these federal agencies that must come down, you also have the nearly 500 corporations that filed bankruptcy. You got several bankruptcies that have occurred between last year and this year. You have federal banks that collapse as well. So there's not going to be a federal bureau of investigation and all these different agencies, HOAs even. They're not Department of Defense. They're going to all cease to exist. So we're going to have the republic to stand as our government and a constitution for our republic to govern our lives. But more importantly, we're going to have to learn to govern ourselves. And in terms of how we conduct business and how we work together, how we eat, we're going to have to grow our own food. We'll have to make our own clothes. We're going to educate our own children because the United States Department of Education is going to cease and desist. This is why the state of Tennessee said last year, we don't want your money. And when that happened, I reported it. They said, we don't want your money. And I said, all other states will follow. They said, we reject money from the Department of Education because the state of Tennessee has money and we can educate our own children. If we take money from the United States Department of Education, the state of Tennessee said, we'll have to follow their curriculum. We'll have to force their agenda on our children. And we're not going to do that anymore. And we'll have to use their standardized testing policies and procedures. And we refuse to do that. We have our own money. And any money that we don't have, people will learn how to educate their own children. Then in Florida, we have school choice programs or school choice policies. I shouldn't say policies, school choice programs or the school choice executive order that was implemented so that if you needed money to put your children in private schools or to homeschool them yourself, the state of Florida gave you money. So Governor Ron DeSantis took money from the public schools to put into school choice program so that our children can be homeschooled or put in private schools. And then other states followed and did the same. So states were preparing to leave the United States Incorporated. This is why over 40 have passed legislation to repeal the state sales tax from precious metals. They said, no longer are you going to rule and govern how we move about and conduct business. And when they repealed the state sales tax from precious metals, they are acknowledging precious metals, silver and gold, as legal tender. And this is in alignment with the Constitution for our republic, which says the only thing that can be used to pay off the debt is silver and gold, according to Article 1, Section 10 of our lawful republic, our lawful Constitution for our republic. And then also the republic and the Constitution for the republic defines the dollar as a fixed weight in silver and as a fixed weight of gold. So these 46 states, over 46 states is what the Sound Money Defense League has now said. So I only know the last state I knew about was the 45th state, which was Kentucky. But they say are now saying over 46 states repealed or removed state sales tax from the sales of precious metals. You cannot put a tax on money. It's unlawful, unconstitutional. Which federal department determined that you were supposed to put state sales tax on money, lawful money? You also have over 33 states that said that putting a capital gains tax on precious metals, on silver and gold, is unconstitutional. So the IRS had determined before on its own, unilaterally made these decisions that silver and gold was to be seen as a collector's item or a collectible, like art, like sports cards, like remember the basketball cards? Yeah. So because the IRS had determined that, making up their own laws based on what they want to do, their emotions, their feelings, their desire to make money, they put a capital gains tax on precious metals. So you're trading or you sell precious metals and you get an income, I guess that's what they call it. You had a capital gains tax put on you. And over 33 states said no more. The IRS they can't, it's unlawful in our state. But what we now know is with the Supreme Court of the United States overturning the Chevron doctrine is that the IRS has to be taken down. They have to cease and desist. Remember, I've been saying this for a couple of years that the IRS is already done away with. It's already gone. Now, many people continue to pay their income taxes because they were, concerned and afraid that if I don't, they might garnish my wages. They might put a lien on my bank account. These folks are so evil that they probably would. So what I had encouraged people to do is write a letter to the IRS, but also write it to the United States Treasury Department, who now is over the IRS, and tell them that you're not able to pay. You can do one of two things. Say, I'm not able to pay this bill because of financial, constraints, or I'm financially unable to pay this bill. Forgive the debt. Forgive the debt, or will you please forgive this debt? Or you could have written a letter and appealed it, and just say, I want to hold off on paying it and keep putting it off until it's an official announcement made. But now, family, we got that official announcement that the Supreme Court of the United States has overturned the Chevron doctrine, which means we are free. So speaking of these federal bureaus, the federal agencies, that were evil and wicked and set up against us, I had read a while ago, several months ago, that the Department of Defense was over the free lunch program. Why is the Department of Defense, a federal agency, over the free lunch program and school lunch programs? And I read that, and when I was reading that, I happened to talk to Gold Star Mother Susan Price, and we were both like sharing the information. She was like, I happen to be writing an article on that. And so she sent me the article a while ago, and then she resent it to me today because she was like, you need to talk about this. I was like, yeah, because I've been meaning to talk about it. I read the articles when I first learned about it, that the Department of Defense, why is a Defense Department over the food for our school children in school? And it says, this is crazy. Each DODEA, Department of Defense Education District, has a district wellness policy that sets nutrition guidelines for all foods and beverages available during the school day. It contains goals for nutrition education, physical activity, and other school activities such as staff wellness, et cetera, et cetera. This is called the Qualified Child Nutrition Professional Guideline, and it talks to you about how students ought to have affordable, nutritious, and appealing foods that meet the health and nutritious needs of students. But are the school lunches in the schools nutritious? I'm gonna put that in the description section. I'm running out of time, so I just put it up there for you to see. Now let's look at Gold Star Mother Susan Price's article. And yes, the Department of Defense is over school lunch programs. I would like for you to look it up, please, and read it for yourself. This is Gold Star Mother Susan Price. Y'all know we're great friends. She is a military veteran. Her son, Aaron Michael Kennefic, I will keep saying his name, died while on duty, working for the military. Within the military, he was on a mission, in the middle of a mission, trying to take the deep state down, working to take the deep state down. And because he knew too much, they got rid of him. They unalived him. They killed him. But Gold Star Mother Susan Price, she is walking in his spirit, like she's being guided by him to get as much information out for us so that we can help raise the vibrations of our family and take down the deep state. So she is a prolific writer for America Out Loud. And here's her question. Questions arises as to why the Department of Defense is involved in school lunch programs. It's summertime, and the last thing on a parent's mind is thinking about their children's school protocols and lunches. But are you aware that the Department of Defense is the custodial department of the United States government responsible for American children's school breakfast and lunch programs, she asked. Some food for thought on this sensitive issue. Why? And how has the transgender explosion emerged among American children? Are our children being experimented on through the food sources provided to them within their own education system? The United States Department of Education supporting transgender youth in schools is an article you also should read to add to this discussion. Through the past 2 decades, we've witnessed a culture of the transgender movement and how it crept into its shadows and propelled through the mainstream around the world as though it was a mission on steroids. Taking no prisoners, this obtuse trend found its way into our very own military arena, political officials, Hollywood, the entertainment world, and other platforms. Whether you support or deny this culture, we need to ask ourselves, where did it come from? How does it have power to evolve so quickly to our younger generations? And why was this promoted by government officials? Government mind control, MK Ultra through the food. John F. Kennedy talked about that, Jr., who was on my platform, how he was a victim of MK Ultra. Mind control program through the food. Here is a post that was on Twitter, or X, I think it was. Wall Street apes. Ready to have your mind blown? The Department of Defense, United States Department of Defense, that is providing school lunches in America. And he said, I thought Department of Defense, I thought they stood for something else. But you're saying it's definitely the Department of Defense providing school lunches? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Who mandates this? And try to challenge it. And the courts will defer right back to the Department of Defense and say they have a right to interpret their own laws and to judge whether or not they can be over your foods. History has a way of repeating itself, and this food weaponization issue reminds me of the Nazi scientists that were allowed entrance into the United States. Gold Star Mother Susan Price writes. After World War II, they changed their German last names to Jewish and assimilated into society among the top levels of our American government, and specifically within the elite social and professional platforms of the military, political, media, big pharma, and others. Remember, we said they're all one big club. They also had children who lived and worked within these arenas and were indoctrinated with outside influences. Did you know these vendors furnishing our children's school lunch programs are the same vendors supplying daycare centers? They're supplying the universities, they're supplying the prisons, the hospitals, and certain restaurant chains. Department of Defense, controlling the food source. Sound like some type of military operation. That's me talking now. Gold Star Mother Susan Price continues by saying, could various major food suppliers be part of this agro-terrorism that has weaponized against the human race in efforts to harm the health and well-being of the population? Are they targeting every man, woman, and child in the name of obesity, sterilization, gender confusion, and other maladies by the injection of toxic vaccines and chemicals? Glyphosates, trans fats, fructose foods, additives, herbicides, antibiotics, hormones, and all that into food products? When I hear them talk about every man, woman, and child, it reminds me of what I read in John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr.'s book. In the beginning, in the foreword of his book is called Stolen Identity. He stated a quote by his father, John Fitzgerald Kennedy Sr., and it says, "There is a plot to destroy every man, woman, and child. There is a plot to destroy and kill every man, woman, and child in America. And before I leave this high noble office, I intend to expose that plot of our government." And that's why they got rid of John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. So hearing Gold Star Mother ask this question reminds me of that statement quoted by JFK Sr. Are they targeting every man, woman, and child in the name of obesity, sterilization, gender confusion, and other maladies by the injection of toxic vaccines and chemicals? Glyphosates, trans fats, fructose foods, additives, herbicides, antibiotics, hormones into the foods? The government's narrative on nutritional meals means nothing if children are becoming ill and throwing out half of the food that's being served to them anyway. Why isn't the school lunch program rebranded as a nutritional wellness program instead of the weaponized Department of Defense? Is our food being weaponized? Did you know that this food was in the daycare centers? Did you know that they targeted not only the daycares, but the poor children every child. But think about the poor children and how you have programs like the Black Panthers. They have free lunch programs, breakfast programs, and all that for the poor children and for Black children. And yes, we want our children to have nutrition. And I told mother, I said, this is bothering me. Like, were the Black Panthers and some of these programs, were they involved in the weaponization, food weaponization, and trying to harm children? And her thought is that, we all need to feed hungry children, no matter what race they are. So she was like, I believe that people really want, free food for everybody. She said President Truman came up with this after the war, I think she said it was. So food programs so that we can feed everybody. But then you got to remember that these programs are overtaken by the cabal, by the Department of Defense.
I'm only soft when I like somebody. The rest of y'all get this gangster shit, bitch.